Well, what's going on, guys? Ted from Immersion here, and I've done a video recently covering my fixes to an Unearthed Arcana, specifically the Barbarian and Monk Unearthed Arcana, but it brought up a lot of interesting conversation in the chat with my initial video about things that, I would say I'm not, um, unaware of, but people brought up a lot of stuff about they'll do this, but they won't fix Ranger, they won't fix Sorcerer, or whatever the case may be. So that being said, today I'm going to give you my proposed way to fix the 5e Sorcerer. And if you want to see what I'm talking about, why I think it needs to be fixed, or what should be done, stay tuned. All right, so what am I talking about? So I can't pretend that I understand everything everyone is saying when they say that they think the sorcerer needs to be fixed. I can give you my perspective and what I think needs to be fixed, and then I will give you my proposed fixes. So one of my number one issues with the sorcerer is number of spells known. So we're going to jump over here to D&D Beyond real quick. So here's the sorcerer class. And you can see down the bottom here, they do get the most cantrips of any character in the game, or any class in the game. They get 15 total spells known. And that caps out at level 17. They will know 15 spells known at 17, and they will not know any additional spells past 17. Let me show you two other things. The Eldritch Knight Fighter, which is a 1/3 casting class, at level 20, cat knows 13 spells known. Okay? They know 13 spells known across 4 spell levels. They only get up to 4th level spells. The sorcerer only knows 2 more than them and has an additional 5 levels of spells. So I hear what you're saying, that's just not how things work or whatever the case may be, but let's go and look at the Bard. The Bard, which is also a full casting class with spellcasting from levels 1 to 9, gets 22 spells known, and it is basically the same kind of a thing. Look at it this way. A Paladin, which is a half casting class, if a Paladin makes it all the way to level 20, and they have a 20 charisma, so a +5 modifier, they will know they'll be able to prepare. Let me rephrase. They have the entire spell list, but they'll be able to prepare 15 spells. So they'll be able to have access to as many spells on a given day as a sorcerer of the same level, which should be arguably more, being a full casting class. And they can still swap out their spells daily. Same deal with a cleric or a druid, except theirs is 25 spells total known or available to them, prepared per day. And then the wizard is an ungodly amount, but typically the maximum would be 25. So my issue with this is, what happened? Because it used to be, and I can't speak for every edition, but like the sorcerer and the wizard were the arcane casting classes. I'm not counting warlock in here because that doesn't really count. Because of the way their spells work. But Warlock wasn't like a base class back in 3.5. It came out it was a base class eventually, but it wasn't a core class, I should say. But your Wizard and your Sorcerer were your arcane casting classes, and they were your heavy-duty spell slingers, and still had, Wizard had more options, but Sorcerer still had a whole bunch. And I feel like they really get hamstringed in 5th edition in that respect. And the reason why is I feel like the way meta magic works, not in all cases, and I'll talk about a couple, but I feel like the way meta magic and the way things are kind of built with a lot of the way the subclasses work is you are more or less focused on damage. Yes, I understand what you're going to tell me, that the kind of celestial based one or divine soul sorcerer is not that case. It can be a healer, and I would agree with you, but I'm saying, with the exception of that, most other abilities of all other sorcerers, right, whether they be draconic or some of the unearthed arcana stuff like the Phoenix or the Storm Sorcerer, all of their features are typically based around when you cast a spell that does magic damage of X, you do X or you do Y because of that. You deal extra damage, you can fly, you could do some other thing, but it's all usually keyed off of you doing a spell that does some kind of damage. Therefore, meaning you're primarily in a damaging role. And also, unfortunately, if you take that a step further, I'm just looking at what's the list here, right? So Divine Soul can heal, they're a separate issue. Draconic, you do damage based on your Draconic thing. Shadow Magic, not as much. Storm Sorcery, yes, and Wild Magic has its own little funky thing. But again, you are still typically based on you are doing damage, and that's sort of a problem when you only have 15 spells, and then there's only, especially if you're one of these elemental-based kind of sorcerers, there's only so many spells in a given element. So, taking all of that aside, how do we fix this sorcerer? Well, one thing that I've always thought is stupid, and I was fixing this originally in my own homebrew game for Sorcerer, but I think it should just exist for all casting classes. So, since you don't have ritual casting as a sorcerer, there's probably not a lot of times that you're going to take, and I could be wrong, I'm talking, I guess, from more of a more optimization standpoint, not a lot of times you're probably going to take Detect Magic. Because if you only have so many limited spell options, wasting one on something that somebody else can just do as a ritual, or have always prepared from some other feature, seems like it's probably a waste for you to waste one of your very precious 15 spells known on it. So this is sort of a fix that I'm taking across the board with my campaign. If you are a full casting class, you just automatically know Detect Magic, and you can cast it as a ritual only. So that would be that's my larger fix to the campaign, to the D&D for homebrew in general. If you still want to take the spell or prepare the spell so you can cast it as an action, you can still do that, but you always have access to it as a ritual. So that would be fix number 1, is give the sorcerer Detect Magic, from however you want to word it, Detect Magic as a ritual. So they still have the ability to sense magical energies, which makes sense. If you can sling all sorts of arcane magics, you should at least be able to get a general feeling of whether something is magic or not. And I know a lot of people sometimes just use an Arcana check to kind of give you that, but this would be a more tangible means of doing so. Secondly, give the sorcerer Find Familiar, right? Again, I harken back to 3.5 is where I started, but both the wizard and the sorcerer had familiars. Warlock, it seems like an arcane thing, right? Warlocks can get a familiar. They have to make a bunch of choices, but they can do other cool things if they choose that route. So give the sorcerer Find Familiar as a ritual as well. And I think that it doesn't do too much, but it gives them a cool thing and some more identity as a character, and I like that. If you're going to drop anything of what I'm going to propose as fixes, those would be the ones I would get rid of. So that's out of the way. Detect Magic, Find Familiar as a ritual. How else would I fix it? Give them the Bard's spell progression. So they start knowing 4 spells. Sorcerer starts knowing, look at this. You know 2 spells and 4 cantrips. So I guess you do get more cantrips, but you only know 2 first level spells, whereas the Bard knows double that. So I would just, basically what I did is take the Bard's spell progression in this list and just take it and copy paste it for Sorcerer. So now at level 20, your Sorcerer has 22 spells known. Now obviously the Bard has their magical secrets, which is going to give them some special things as well. So that kind of still lets the Bard seem their own and have their own unique spell list, right? They still have the separate spell lists, but just give them 22 spells known. So it'll be 7 more total on your 20th level sorcerer. And I feel like that'll also free you up to maybe you'll take more utility spells. Or you know what, you're not going to focus all in one kind of damage. You're going to split things up a little bit and take something else. And then lastly, my final effect that I would add, which will go up here and we'll snag it from the wizard, is I would add a short rest recharge mechanic for sorcery points. So a wizard here at level, 1? Level 2, I think it is. You have learned to regain some of your magical energy by studying your spellbook. Once per day when you finish a short rest, you can choose to expend spell slots to recover. The spell slots can be a combined level that is equal to or less than half your wizard level rounded up, and none of the spell slots can be higher than 6, or it can be 6 level or higher. So what I would say would be you basically take this concept and say, if you are a sorcerer and you finish a short rest, you can recover up to half your level worth of sorcery points rounded up, similar to this. You can only do this once per long rest, but because your sorcerer spell slot, or your sorcery points can be used to fuel meta magic, which is one of your key class features, but also can be used to be converted into spell slots, you can sort of get the arcane recovery of the wizard, but not exactly, and it's still unique to you because you could just choose to use them solely for meta magic. So that would be my small list of fixes to fix what's broken with the sorcerer. Divine soul sorcerer, I will admit, having access to the cleric list of spells and having access to healing spells does make your spell choice slightly different and gives you options when you're using things like extend spell and twin spell. And I do think that that's well done. I do still think that same sorcerer would still benefit from everything I've told you today. Detect magic as a ritual, find familiar as a ritual, increased spell selection overall, spells known selection, which would be even better for them, given the fact that they also have access to the sorcerer list, the cleric list, and then giving them the sorcery points recharge on a short rest once a day. That would also be useful. So that's pretty much it, guys. Those 4 things. The other thing that could fix it, and this is a lot more work, and you need to do this specifically to the class, is something we saw in the original Unearthed Arcana publication of the Storm Sorcerer, which was give the sorcerer additional spells known per level. Not an additional spell option like you'd have with something like a warlock. Give them 1 additional spell known per level of spell up to 5th level, similar to a domain spell or a circle spell, or even more realistically, more recent, the way a ranger, the new rangers get 1 extra spell thematically tied to their class at each level of spell that they get. I think that could go a long way to just increase the overall. That would be 5 more spells, right? That would be a decent way to increase the overall amount of utility that your sorcerer would have, especially if it was themed, right? So if the Divine Soul Sorcerer got like Bless, I know that takes away from the first level ability, but you know what I mean? Like Bless, Lesser Restoration, Spirit Guardians, Death Ward, Raise Dead. Right? You've now removed those options that you would normally have to take. You now have them always prepared, and it feels like you have more freedom. Same thing with we have the ideas of what the Storm Sorcerer had. Give the Draconic Bloodline one some damagey elemental themed things. You get what I'm saying. But that is obviously a lot more work, and you need to build out a specific curated list for each different subclass, and then it means going forward when new ones are released, you'd also have to do that. So my proposed fix addresses the base class, and then that should be applicable from now and with any subclasses going forward. So once again, that list is detect magic as a ritual, find familiar as a ritual, give them the bard's spell known spell progression, and give them a short rest recovery way to get sorcery points back once per long rest. So when they take a short rest, get half of their level worth of sorcery points. We're gonna round it down actually because they can get a lot more sorcery points. So half their level rounded down, number of sorcery points recharged. That's a maximum of 10 at level 20. Once per long rest, which they can then use however they see fit, whether they want to use them for meta magic or to convert them into spell slots. That's what I think. I'm very curious to see if you guys have put any thought into how you could fix or have fixed the sorcerer in a game you're playing in or a game you've seen or witnessed. Do you think that I'm completely crazy and there's nothing to fix on sorcerer at all and it's fine the way it is? And if you disagree with my fixes, how would you fix it yourself? So let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.